We watched the Doncaster Ledger.
Yep.
Simple Verse battles to victory. She seems to be putting up a tremendous performance for a filly. Then there's a stewards' inquiry, and the Doncaster stewards tell us that actually, in their opinion, Bondi Beach is a better horse because they were going to promote him to first place. They did promote him to first place. And as we know, a few weeks later, the panel in London decided to reverse that decision. As a BHA handicapper, did you believe the Doncaster stewards, or did you always believe Simple Verse was the best horse?
Okay. So on the Sunday morning following the race, I contacted my staying handicapper on the flat, Mark Ollie, and we chatted it through basically. And we watched the race through on a number of occasions. And the reality is, and it's probably quite interesting the way the two inquiries have gone, is we didn't know. We absolutely didn't know who would have been the winner had interference taken place on.
Why didn't you know, Phil? We all knew.
Well, I don't.
How can the handicappers not know?
I think that when you say we, I think there was quite a split in there. I wasn't surprised that the first decision was made. I could see why they made that decision. So what we decided to do was, first of all, what's the level of the race? Okay, and we were pretty happy that Fields of Athenry, who had performing to 114 in the Ebor, had replicated that performance. So there's our base figure, right? We look back, and historically, certainly the last two winners of the Ledger have been 117. And that fitted neatly with Bondi Beach, because Bondi Beach is a length 3/4. He clearly had issues on the way through. I think everybody would believe he's significantly better than a length and 3/4 ahead of Fields of Athenry, and we call that £3. So we've got Bondi Beach on 117 and Fields of Athenry on 114. Then what to do with Simple Verse? Okay, remember she's getting £3 fillies allowance, and we decided in effect to call them the same horse. So because we've said it's a dead heat. And
so that was very much sitting on the fence.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
But of course by then we knew there was going to be an appeal. And that's just our first decision. These decisions are looked again at over and over and over again. Who's to say that these horses aren't going to run again, in which case we'll have another chance to evaluate the form. And of course, as soon as a horse gets to 115, the horse will be discussed again at our end-of-year International Handicappers meeting in Hong Kong. So at this point, straight after the race, we've called it a dead heat. In a sense, that's supporting the stewards on the day, because a dead heat is a win. And so we've called Simple Verse 114.
It's also a loss.
We've called Simple Verse 114, Bondi Beach 117. Now, both Mark Ollie and myself thought, oh my God, we're going to get, you know, oceans of phone calls and emails and stuff like that. Nothing. Absolutely.
Well, that's because none of us knew you'd sat on the fence like that. If we'd known, you would have done.
But the figures are in, the Irish rating is in the Irish Turf Club website. Simple Verse is on ours. She went in on 108, she was promoted to 114. And the honest answer is, you've got to remember that he got interfered with twice. Right? There was two pieces of interference.
No,
I think that came over on a number of occasions. So, although she's finishing superbly, how does anybody know what that interference cost? However, we did have at the back of our mind just an inkling that this is the second time this had happened to Bondi Beach, because obviously it happened in the Voltigeur at York.
And this is something that actually, having spoken to Paul Barton, that in stewards' inquiries they're not allowed to consider this, but you can.
We absolutely can.
You've decided Bondi Beach would never go past.
Well, we decided at this point that we didn't know, but our gut feeling was that perhaps Bondi Beach is a horse that doesn't want to go past. Right? So we had some doubts about Bondi Beach's, let's call it courage in a battle.
At this level?
At this absolutely top level, when they're all absolutely all out. So we thought the most sensible thing in the first part was to go 114 and 117. Okay. So then there's the appeal, and the appeal is successful. We've moved Simple Verse up £1.
So now you're agreeing with everyone who knew already that Simple Verse is a better horse?
I think opinion was split.
I know
that I watched you the day after on the programme here, talking to the guys in the studio that day, and you were, you know, adamant that it had been
they were all wrong,
that it was an incorrect decision. But actually, over the next day or 2 days or 3 days, there was quite a lot of sensible talk. about...
Oh, that's a loaded comment,
There was
Mr.
a lot
Smith.
of sensible talk about, well, was that, really the case? When a horse does get 2 pieces of interference, remember that the decision in the end is ahead. That's what, 0.1 of a second, 0.05 of a second, something of that region. So could one say with certainty, as you obviously are, that Bondi Beach wasn't inconvenienced by 0.05
No,
of a second?
so you're misunderstanding the rules. The point is...
No, this is our decision.
No.
This is irrelevant to the rules.
No, but
This is our decision.
No, but you're not understanding the rules, Phil. You've opened yourself up for terrible abuse here. The reason I was saying that is because I didn't know. And if I don't know, then the result has to stand. That's the point.
Right. You didn't know, and that's your opinion. I didn't know, and I couldn't say whether the stewards were right or wrong on the day to decide that he was inconvenienced. And remember, you only need them to think it could have been a dead heat for it to have been... That's a win.
But there'll be people watching this, Phil, who will say to themselves, quite rightly, some might say, that the stewards on the day, you gave them the benefit of the doubt, and so you put the figures equal, and just said, oh, it's a dead heat, so we won't annoy anyone. Then the appeal went in and thought, oh, hold on, fellas, we'll just wait to see what the appeal does, and then you finally adjusted it to what you really felt, but you didn't want to annoy the stewards because you're all part of the same body.
Well, it's not a question of annoying the stewards. It's a question of doing what you think is right at the time when you only have a portion of the information available. And with handicapping and rating horses, more information comes on track over a period of time. You have more information. It's perfectly reasonable. But I think, remember that although these horses are never going to run in handicaps, right, we've got to assess them as if they are. And so I don't think, if we had £3 between them, which was the fillies' allowance, and they would reoppose in the future on the same terms, do you think everybody could be absolutely confident as to the outcome of that race? I'm not sure you could.
It's an interesting thought here. One thing that I thought was missed slightly in that race, with all the talk about the first 2, was the runner Fields of Athenry, who led, got outpaced, but actually, for me, was arguably finishing off best of all at the finish, suggesting that, I mean, I don't know what he is, Fields of Athenry, but he's not, I mean, there's no on your ratings, he's not far behind them, and in a different type of race, run in a different way, you could almost argue that Fields of Athenry might be bang there.
Well, in his races, he gives me the impression that actually when he's stepped up to 2 miles, he'll be able to put up a better performance. I mean, he's a solid 1:14 over a mile and 3/4. He's run a great race in the Ebor. He's run a great race in the Ledger. We're pretty confident that he's in that level of him as 1:14. And remember that 2 of these horses are trained in Ireland, and so they're not necessarily our responsibility. They're the responsibility of the Irish handicapper Gary O'Gorman. And we've got to, we can't go out on a limb and say, well, okay, we'll go 119 Bondi Beach because Matt on a Sunday says he's the best horse, or Simple Verse, whatever. It's an international. These are international horses, and you lose your international credibility when you try and make a sort of an outrageous decision based on what was actually a really tricky situation.